callow prime minister, a global superstar, shadowy international arms dealers, crafty middlemen, and nosy journalists were the dramatis personae of a real life political thriller that played out in Stockholm, Davos, Bern, Geneva, and New Delhi nearly 4 decades ago. Of all the names crowding India's biggest and most notorious $1.4 billion arms purchase scandal involving the Bofors howitzer guns manufactured by a Swedish armaments giant was one investigative journalist who stood out for her relentless pursuit of the truth behind who received the kickbacks. The journalist, now the well known veteran of the profession, Chitra Subramaniam, faced threats to her and her family's lives, her car brake slashed, windshield broken, and even offered a suitcase full of what remains a mystery. Chitra, who has lived near Geneva, Switzerland for a long time, has revisited that remarkable story in her book, Boforsgate, A Journalist's Pursuit of Truth. Among other questions, the book examines whether the late former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was a beneficiary of the Bofors kickbacks. It is a scandal that may be dated, but still retains juice for the current generation. Chitra spoke to MCR from Geneva. Welcome to Mindshare Reports, Chitra. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mayank, and thank you for inviting me to your show.
Congratulations on your remarkable book on the never dying Bofors scandals. It's been an exceptional, I read parts of it. I haven't read it fully, but like I said, I'm very aware of your work as well as the Bofors as a story. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to start with a broad question. It's nearly 40 years since the Bofors gun corruption allegations exploded. There have been 8 governments in that period of VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, Narasimha Rao, Deve Gowda, I.K. Gujral, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, and Narendra Modi now. And yet, after all these decades, we are not exactly clear where the money went in the deal of nearly $1.4 billion at that point. Tell me how you look at this passage of time as someone who was at the core of the investigation.
The thing is, as you know, I was in India recently with the book, launching it and promoting it. And one person made a very interesting comment. She said that the moment you go anywhere near the Gandhi family, why is it that Bofors continues to be what it is, as you just said? It's just that, there have been much bigger scandals, if you wish, in terms of money.
Right.
Here you're looking at 1.4 billion. But the issue that makes this one stick out is that the corruption washed around the Prime Minister of India, around the Prime Minister's office. It led to his downfall. So it's left that kind of an impact. And all these governments that you said, so many governments that followed, they have their own reasons. Some obviously because they are pro-Congress, the others because they depend on some kind of coalition politics. And more recently, as I say in my book, I had Mr. George Fernandez, who was in the opposition, tell me that he had been told by the National Security Advisor to not, Rajesh Mishra, to not open the box because we need to keep, we need to stay out of Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's way. Now, I don't know how much of that is true, but this was said to me. In much the same way, you had also the law minister,
Right.
Mr. Jethmalani. Both of them were the pioneers of saying, Rajiv Gandhi is involved, but then they all became very quiet when both of them were in power and they could have opened the box. So the fact remains that it's not so much a mystery to me as it is a sense of, and I also want to add one more thing to your question, Mayank. As a journalist, it's not my problem to figure out why they haven't opened the box. My work will be continuing to ask questions, right?
Right.
Otherwise, what is the difference between you and me if we try to find a reason as to why somebody is, why they are keeping quiet or why they are not doing this? That is their problem.
Indeed.
I will continue to ask questions because I believe the box has not been opened.
It is mystifying the sway of the Gandhis, as you mentioned. Either there is a case where there is absolutely nothing to the story.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would avowedly anti-Gandhi governments of both the Vajpayee administration, especially the current one, after 10 years of being in power, they haven't raised a finger on this issue. So either there is nothing to that, or there is so much that they are not willing to open the box as you're talking about. What's
I
your
believe I
speculation? What's in
believe
the
it's
box?
I believe it's the latter. I
Okay.
don't believe that there's nothing to it, because I mean, if there were nothing to it, I mean, come to think of it, I mean, the prime minister lost an election. You know, you destroyed so much. You had a majority, I mean, 440 seats. You could do whatever you wanted. And yet you went out of your way to destroy the parliament, the judiciary, the executive. Even the army was not spared. I mean, you went after human beings, personal, your own friend, Arun Singh, processes, everything was destroyed just to save the reputation of one man.
Right.
So why is it that, and I believe that this government, when my book came out, of course, they said, you must do this and you must do that. But I no longer, well, I've never believed politicians for the simple reason that I believe that they have another agenda.
Hmm.
My job description is to find out what happened.
Right.
Their job description is to take care of the country or to find the best guns. By the way, they were very good guns. We got very good guns for a very good price. But the problem was the corruption.
Right.
So even this government, I mean, you come to power on anti-corruption, this, anti-corruption, that, then why are you not opening the box? But then I have thought about this also, and I said, if I start playing that, go down that road, why have they not opened? Why have they not opened? Then it's a waste of my time.
Yes. No, but do you, as a journalist, wonder what it is? Somebody has seen what is inside. It's not as if they've been there completely sealed all these decades. Someone knows what the box contains, right?
Oh,
What is Yeah? What
surely,
is your
surely.
sense?
My
Yeah.
sense, my sense is that my sense, or more than my sense, I know for a fact that Mr. Stian Lindström, who was my chief source in Sweden, the high police officer, he told me that money has gone beyond. And AE Services, the company that is linked to Mr. Quattrocchi, they've got more than 7 million. They've got at least 14 million, if not more. And the deal is not for 3%. The deal is for, at the very least, 12%, as the arms dealer told me, or 18%, as Bofors told the government of India at one point when they had a meeting with all the top officials who came to India, and then they met all the top bureaucrats.
Right.
Or what was called a cover-up session. I call it the tuition session, where they said, "Don't ye mat bolna, wo mat bolna," say
Right.
this and say that. So you're basically telling an arms dealer, an arms manufacturing company that cheated you, and in a big way, to say, no, don't say this to the Joint Parliamentary Committee, because they can't keep it, they can't keep it secret. So what are you doing? Not only are you smearing the country, you're smearing yourself as well.
Right.
And then this high level, the two top people from Bofors come down. They want to give the names of the recipients to my prime minister. And then the prime minister says, no, I want it in writing. If you give it to me orally, I won't take it. So look at the types of cover-ups that's been going on. But to answer your question, what is in that box from my perspective? One very important thing in that box that I would like to know is that who was giving the instructions, because somebody obviously was giving instructions.
Right.
Of course, I need to know how much money was involved, and I'm not the only one. I think the whole country wants to know how much money was involved. But more than that, who was giving the instructions at every step? Because you see, every time I wrote a story,
Mhm.
the story of the doors who were lying changed, but there
Right.
was obviously somebody giving instructions. So who was giving instructions? Like if I went left, they said go right. If I went right, they said go on the top. So my thing is that obviously these documents were sent to India after 10 years of a court battle in Switzerland. So we need to know the lawyers, what were the court arguments, what happened in the courts,
Right.
who are the people in the courts, what was their reason for stalling for 10 years. So that by itself would be very interesting to know why is it that beyond the guns, and don't forget, this is a question of national security here.
Right. Right. When you were first given the documents, you write in your book that you were almost hoping that they were false.
Yeah.
In a sense, you were invested in the new prime minister, that is
Yes.
Rajiv Gandhi, who had announced with much fanfare about being
Yeah.
Mr. Clean and restoring integrity to the government.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that you were perhaps wrongly invested in that thought?
At what point did I realize that? Um First, the I mean, the first when the story came,
Hmm.
the prime minister said that he's not involved. Remember, he said neither me nor my family, which was a very silly thing to say. I mean, I thought, it was naive and maybe he panicked, or he didn't have enough experience as a prime minister. But he continued to shoot himself in the foot. One thing after another. Then, the Hindujas were identified 4 days later by this very, very good journalist, Bo Andersson of Dagens Nyheter. And then I think by about 6 months before I started getting the documents, I realized that my plan, because you could have contacted the Swedish government.
Right.
You could have sent somebody down to Sweden immediately to figure out what was going on. This was not done. So
That's true.
you're shooting left, right, and center from India. So before I got the first set of documents, which was in 1987, I started to realize that my prime minister was in trouble, and that was not easy for me because I was also young. I mean, I was ambitious for India, like I suppose all of us were at that
Right.
point. And he was young, and he said that we will become a strong nation, and I still continue to be very ambitious for my country. So that I almost wanted to find that I was wrong.
I
And
hear. Yeah, I understand that. But sometime in March of 1991,
yeah,
just a couple of months before he was assassinated,
yeah.
Rajiv Gandhi hosted a sort of a high tea in his bungalow for journalists. I was one of the journalists invited.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, and I asked him point blank whether he took a bribe in the Bofors deal, straight up. To his credit, I mean, going by the current environment, perhaps I would have been thrown out. But he looked me in the eye without flinching. He said, "I did not." Now, I don't know what to make of it, but he was very, I mean, this is after 4 years, 5 years of the things happening. But till that point, he was clear that he had not. And I'm left wondering after these many decades, what exactly happened? Did somebody take the money on behalf of, say, for the party, or what exactly happened? No one knows, and it remains a mystery. Do you think this mystery will be solved?
You know, I don't think he took the money. I
Okay.
genuinely don't think he took the money, but he misread everything around it. And I think he was set up, and very badly set up, by people around him. I mean, the person who set him up, you can see, is Arun Nehru,
Hmm.
who was the eminence grise of the thing, and he had been following and the negotiations and talking to the Swedes and giving them instructions. But when he told you that point blank that he did not take the money, I think the man was being honest. Because when I went to India, I had an interview with Veer Sanghvi, and they were friends.
Right, right.
So Veer, at one point, he had told that, he had told Veer that that girl in Geneva, is printing photocopies. तो जैसे कि उनको एक लड़की भारी पड़ गई, you know. But after Bofors, after he fell, he said Bofors. Veer told me that it was Bofors that got him. But that still doesn't mean he took the money.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we know, sorry, yeah, we
No,
know
no,
for
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
the documentary evidence, there is documentary evidence to show that money went to Ottavio Quattrocchi, and the greedy man that he was, he touched the money quickly and the money went further. But there is nothing to show that Rajiv Gandhi himself took the money. And Quattrocchi is a friend of Sonia Gandhi. They are
Right.
friends.
Right.
He's an Italian businessman. He's no more. Let him rest in peace. But Rajiv Gandhi, there's no evidence to say that he took the money.
Right. Interestingly, soon after the allegation started and your story started coming out, Sam Pitroda had also asked Rajiv Gandhi straight up, because Sam was greatly invested in India at that point, soon after being successful in this country. And he went on record saying he said exactly the same thing. He said, "Sam, believe me, I did not take any money." So anyway, that's the history now. I'm more interested in your process. For 10 years, from 1987 right until 1997, you were inundated with all kinds of complex documents. Tell me, as a journalist, what were your challenges keeping track of so many details, so many names, so many intricacies?
There were many. There were several. Not the least was that I was also a pregnant. I was pregnant. I had my child in the middle of all this, so I was juggling two very important careers, two jobs: that of being a mother
Right.
and that of being a journalist working on something as important as this. Uh, Documents, I just laid them out all over the house, and then, uh, my God, when I think about it, I want to cry. But soon I realized that there had to be some kind of method in my madness. Otherwise, this was not going to stop. I mean, there were threats to my life. So I had begun to build in a system of protection. Journalists, you are a journalist, and you know how we all build in a certain type of system that protects us. So one of them was physical safety, which my husband and I built in, and then I also spoke uh, to my source in Sweden and to my source in Switzerland to say, listen, I'm getting these types of threats. So they were protecting me. The other issue was just simply going to the shop and buying, groceries. You
Right.
know, from managing that to understanding what was going on, because if you looked at all the documents one by one, if you looked them individually, everything was clean. You had the contract, you had the payment, you had this, except the payment that said don't say the name of the who got. In fact, that was a giveaway, because in one of the payments in the bank, that was where the whole thing started, where the a payment into an account in the Swiss bank said that don't write the name of the recipient.
I see. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah. So then the bank, which is the Skandinaviska Enskilda Banken, which is like our reserve bank or a central bank, the banker, he asked that if these payments are indeed legal, then why are you saying that you should not give out the name of the recipient? And thereby hangs a long story of Bofors being unable to answer, why they were paying illegally. So that was one giveaway, to come back to your earlier question as to the giveaways. But to sort of understand like a naksha, like a map.
that. Right.
So that was one thing, which my source that I started getting to know later explained to me. But before that, I met an arms dealer in Geneva, who made me a GPS
I
of.
see.
Hmm. So he said, this is not 3%, Chitra, this is at least 12%, at the very least, if not more, because he said no arms deal of this nature. I mean, it was 1.4 billion, in 1980 something, early 80s. He said no deal of this nature is for 3%. He laughed at me.
I
So
see.
he had also made me like this will go there, that will go here. So it's a pretty standard operating procedure. But then how was I going to believe an arms dealer?
Right.
So I had to, in more ways than one, I had to figure out who is setting me up, who is not setting me up, Uh, and, I had to also prove myself to myself.
Hmm.
Much as I had to prove myself to myself that I was a good mother, and what does that mean? I mean, who is a good mother, who is a less good mother? I had to also prove myself to myself that my journalism stood its
Right.
worth and test of time. And I had a friend in India, Kumi Kapoor. Maybe you know Kumi.
I do indeed.
Yeah. So she was my only source then. I mean, we didn't have any WhatsApp, or, I didn't even get to see the what I was writing. That was that. And later, as I went on, I had to also deal with my editor, Mr. N. Ram, who
Yes.
was playing games with my story. So, the higher I went, the higher I went closer to power, there are all kinds of things coming in, like the bureaucrats, like Mr. Gopi Arora or Mr. S.K. Bhatnagar or Mr. Karta or Mr. N.N. Vora. Everybody had something to take from this story or something to cover up, which is why I wrote this book. One
Right.
of the reasons of writing this book is to put out my version of it, what really happened. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so the challenges were just not one or two, and they were coming from many directions. And sometimes I didn't. It took me a while. This is what happened. It took me a while to understand that they're all coming from. These are issues that I should give more attention to. These are issues that can wait. That's how I dealt with them.
Right. You write, and I quote you now, in their arrogance, racism, and misogyny, arms dealers, government, politicians thought they could buy me with money.
Yeah,
Yes, I was offered a suitcase, unquote.
yeah.
But you never found out what your
No,
price was.
no, no, because this person came into my office with this case, and then, I mean, he just the gall of giving it to you like this. And no, I didn't, and I remember driving home very fast, scared,
Mhm.
because lots of issues running through your head. No, I mean, how dare, what does he think? And
Right,
that was the first. Second, maybe, was there a bomb in there? You never know, suitcase bomb.
right.
And just feeling sort of dirty and ashamed, that somebody could, because, for me, my profession, and I'm sure for you as well, there is a sanctity attached to being a journalist. It's a noble profession, and when I put pen to paper, for me, I'm not sounding sanctimonious. I'm saying that I'm fully aware of my responsibility. So
Uh,
when you think you can put a money price on it, I think it's just ghastly.
yeah, you'd feel like taking a shower after that.
Don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ah,
In
yeah,
retrospect, Chitra, in retrospect, I emphasize that it sounds cinematic. Here is this young journalist is traveling through Stockholm and Davos and Bern and Geneva, talking to arms dealers, police investigators, politicians, being offered a suitcase, being threatened there is a threat to her life and her family's life. It sounds all very cinematic now, but I'm sure at that point it must have been absolutely harrowing for you.
it was harrowing. It was harrowing, and it's even more harrowing now. But that time it was, oh my God, you know what I felt? I came home and I quickly got into bed and I covered myself with a duvet
Oh,
because I felt I have to protect myself. I mean, it came down to that basic thing, how dare you?
that's
And
amazing. Yeah.
I'm saying this for the first time. I don't think I've never said it to anyone, but I remember coming home, quickly getting into bed. It must have been 3:34 in the afternoon or maybe even earlier. I got into the bed and I did this. I said, my God, you know, how filthy is, I mean, you feel like somebody has expat on you or vomited on you, uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you
No,
know,
that's really touching and in a way stunning that you felt that and to think that a duet would help you.
yes, so that you can't find me behind my duvet. I mean, it was so, you know, that's what I did.
Right, right.
I felt terrible. I felt terrible.
Speaking of details, to change gears a bit, there were so many accounts: Lotus, Tulip, Mobla, then electronics. You had Panama registered Svenska. You had AE services. But Svenska was, of course, the much maligned and much reviled Win Chadda, whom I met in Delhi.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, at his residence. And for him, it was like all in a day's work. He wasn't
I know, I know, I know, I know. I
low-level arms dealer, but he was quite a hustler, interesting guy. And
This
he
is
didn't
funny
seem
you say that to
troubled
me.
by all this.
This is funny because we told me he was a low-level arms dealer. He was a
Yeah.
hustler. He was a hustler.
And
And
yet he was at the core of it still.
at the core of it, and he did all the work. And I remain convinced that he was cut into. In fact, I believe he did a lot of hard work. He worked very hard on this.
You know, of all the people interesting, you should mention it. Perhaps he was the most diligent.
Yes, yes, he was. And, carrying the files from here to there, doing this, doing that. And, there's even a document which we never used, but he even had to buy pearls for Swedish, for somebody in Sweden. And I think, I don't know if his wife is called Kamla. He said Kamla has bought the pearls and the curtains. I mean, he was doing that kind of stuff as well.
Right.
So, at some point, I felt that this man was made to run around doing all kinds of things.
Yeah.
First, you run the corridors of power, ki bhai, files ko ghumao, yahan ghumao, wahan ghumao. You had to keep, how these things take time.
Bilkul, Delhi ka bura tha approach.
Delhi ka kaam. And then you have to go and shop, for pearls. In fact, the document says that Win says the pearls are done, and somewhere I got into the lives of these people. I got into my imaginary lives of. I would have liked to meet the man to say, listen, you were doing what you had to do. You were doing your job description. You had to get the deal. But my prime minister's job description was not to get corruption. My prime minister was to get a clean deal.
Indeed.
And in much the same way, Martin Ardbo, the chief negotiator from Sweden, his job description was to sell the gun, bring the contract home, which he did.
Right.
The only person who didn't comply with his job description is my prime minister.
Which is saying a lot.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, Mayank.
Yeah. Absolutely, I agree. Somewhere along the line, you had mentioned that of all these accounts that we just talked about, AE services had some distinct political dimension.
Absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So AE services comes into the deal. Let's say, like, these deals take a lot of time to negotiate, at least 10 years. They go back and forth, trials, testing. I have the whole thing in the book, the timeline. And Svenska was there from the beginning, and electronics. AE services comes into the deal 3 months before it's closed, which is in January 1986.
Right.
AE services tells the negotiations, in this case, Bofors, that I will get you the deal by March 1986, in 3 months. And if I don't get you the deal in 3 months, you don't have to pay me. Now, who has this kind of power? And then the deal does get closed in March 1986, just like AE services had predicted. And AE services, for not doing any work, walks away with 7.7 million. But I know that more money has gone into them.
Right.
So this is what is called the political payoff. And I'm told that the political payoff comes on the table when all the numbers are there. All the numbers are there. This is where the political person comes and says, okay, I'm going to take this much. And nobody can question them.
Right.
So powerful is this person. So certainly Ottavio Quattrocchi is not powerful. I mean, why would Bofors pay Ottavio Quattrocchi? Because Bofors knew about Quattrocchi's links in India. So that is a political payment.
I see. You write about a special relationship between Prime Minister Gandhi and the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme. It's amazing to point out at this stage that both these men were assassinated for
Yeah.
different reasons, but they both died. One at the hands of the Tamil Tigers, the other, I think, a lone gunman.
Yeah.
Tell me about that relationship and how that might have played into the deal finally happening.
So the deal was, I mean, when Olof Palme was this Swedish socialist prime minister, he was a fake socialist. I mean, he was trying to look good. He came from the bourgeoisie. His wife is a good socialist, but he was trying to come up, and then he would lecture to the world from the ramparts of the UN, saying we should not be buying and selling arms, while his country was buying and selling arms to Vietnam and all that. He was an absolute fake, like they are doing now. They're selling arms to
Right.
Ukraine and all over the world. And Rajiv Gandhi was a novice at that time. He was young in politics. So I think at some point, Palme took him under his wings to show him the ropes internationally,
Right.
sort of introduce him in conferences. And the deal was already struck during they had come very close to striking the deal. There was a six nation, this some anti-nuclear conference going on in India. I'm trying to think. This was a conference of the Six Nation anti-nuclear countries. They met in Delhi, I think. There was a conversation in Delhi on the sidelines of which this deal was discussed.
I see.
Yeah. And by this time, see, that in the run were two guns, the French, the Sofma gun and Bofors.
Yeah.
And the Bofors' biggest strength was this shoot and scoot capacity, to be able to,
Self-propelled, yeah.
which won the Kargil war.
Right.
So Palme was very, very much involved in the deal. And there was also a conversation in a plane, which was told to me by Sten Lindström,
Right.
that Rajiv Gandhi had told him that he had accepted $7 million on behalf of his party, and can Sweden accept something like that? So Palme told him that no, he can't accept anything for the party, but he could give this money to something called the Berlangens Foundation, which is a foundation in it's an industry foundation in Örebro, near of Stockholm, where he said the money can go to that. And Mr. Sten Lindström, he went and checked if this money had been paid, because there had been inquiries from India as well.
Right.
And I don't write about this in the book, but I'm telling you that, that these monies had actually been paid. So they had the inquiries from India had not come from CBI, which would have made it criminal. They came like a tax inquiry, maybe ED, like a tax inquiry.
Okay.
So now we know that there are 2 7 millions. One paid to AE services in London, which had been locked and unblocked for a few days, so Quattro could take it out. And then the other one, which went to Örebro,
Right.
which shows that there's more in the boxes, right?
Right.
Somebody knows. If you open the box,
You'll find out.
yeah, or somebody has and knows that there's more, but doesn't know what to do, right?
I see. Yeah, that's true.
So now, what is how much is the percentage? And I think Wind Chadda was cut into.
It looks like that. Some years ago, you mentioned Sten Lindström.
Yes.
He was quoted as saying somewhat equivocally about Rajiv Gandhi, and I'm quoting him. He says, there was no evidence that that is Gandhi, received any bribe, but he watched the massive cover-up in India and Sweden and did nothing, unquote.
Which is true.
And in the similar context, since we are talking about Lindström, whom you knew very well, he talks about how the Bachchans, Amitabh Bachchan and Ajitabh Bachchan, were framed basically as by the Indian police, Indian investigators. So tell me a bit about both your association with Sten Lindström and how he looked at this whole scandal.
See, Sten Lindström was very pivotal to to my work. Without him giving me the documents, I would have had no story to say. In fact, his daughter had come to India to release the book. So I'm in touch with him on a very regular basis. My association with him goes back to Bofors. We continue to remain friends. He is in his 80s.
Right.
And according to him, he was just doing his job. And I asked him recently as to why. He said because something very wrong had been done. And the reason he decided to speak to me and me only was he felt that with me, he could speak the truth. And he felt that I would not let him down. As in, I would not use the story for anything other than journalistic use. Now, coming to Mr. Bachchan, his name was planted by the Indian investigators. And I have thought about this quite a lot. You just don't, because you see, Mr. Quattrochi had run away.
Right.
Remember, he had escaped ever since the day I identified him. Indian Express, he ran away. Now, how do you run away from India from the airport? I mean, you can't run away. But
Yeah,
he was
you
allowed.
had to have help. Yeah.
Indeed, he was allowed to flee. So I feel, I'm 100% certain that, they wanted to deflect the name from Rajiv Gandhi. So they said, who is big enough? And they planted Amitabh Bachchan's name. Mr. Bachchan is so big. Big in terms of stature and big in terms of name. So I think he was just brought in.
Right.
And then I refused to implicate him. And then started this whole nonsense about, me becoming soft on him, or
Right.
me becoming, thank God it was him and nobody else. But imagine if I had been linked to an arms dealer.
Right.
But,
there is an interesting parallel between the way you looked at Rajiv Gandhi and the way you looked at Amitabh Bachchan.
Yeah.
You were invested. You were a great admirer of Amitabh Bachchan's.
Oh, and I still am.
And you didn't want that to be true.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before that, I've read Harivansh Rai Bachchan and Madhushala, and I look at the lineage and the knowledge and all that. And of course, the actor. The last thing you want to talk to somebody like him is about money and corruption and Bofors, especially when there is nothing. See, look at I'm glad you brought up this parallel. Here, Rajiv is denying what he has done.
Right.
And Amitabh Bachchan is having to deny what he has not done.
Not done, right.
No, so how can Mr. Bachchan deny what he has not done? You say you put it in that spot. So it was very difficult for me. And then, we met quite a few times. He came home.
He came to your residence, yes?
Yeah, several times. Yeah, several times. And
so
then
tell me about that. Both of them, he and Mrs. Bachchan came.
The first time, yeah. Both of them came home, and then he looked at my husband and said, "Oh, you're taller than me. Giancarlo is very tall." My God, they were just he was so statuesque, and she had a beautiful dress, salwar and suit and a shawl. And then, like you can see Khandani people, no? And we sat, and then we discussed this, and I felt so small. And I said, I don't have any evidence. How do I tell this to somebody? I had to do two things. One, here I am thinking of Amitabh Bachchan, and he at my place asking me if I have seen something. I haven't.
Right.
First of all, if I had seen something, I would be true to my profession. I would not be true to Mr. Bachchan or anybody else. I would be true to my profession.
Right.
So then I was telling him no. And then we had another meeting where he also came home. And then my mother-in-law asked him to lay the table, which he very happily did. And, I'm trying to think, like, if you were to accuse me, and suppose I'm like Amitabh Bachchan in my stature, suppose you accuse me of doing something I have not done. How do I disprove it to you? And you have taken away my credit card, or sometime maybe even my passport. I'm running from pillar to post, trying to prove my guilt.
Right.
The man is not guilty. So,
Right.
and you've taken away, all the agencies are working for you. Where do you go? So
You
he
know,
took, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is an interesting personal angle here. On January 31st, 1990, the paper Dagens Nyheter
Yeah,
published, the Swedish paper
yeah,
first published that
yeah.
one of the 6 accounts belonged to the Bachchans.
That's a famous sixth account. Yeah,
And interestingly, my colleague in London, Rahul Bedi, as a news agency journalist, which is a typical practice if a reputed newspaper publishes something, a news agency, which is India Abroad News Service, picked up that story with complete attribution to the paper. And soon after that, the Bachchans sued India
yes,
Abroad and
yes,
IANS.
yeah,
And but they won in London.
yeah,
But Mr. Raju created an extraordinary precedent by saying that I'm a New York American newspaper. You can't shop libel elsewhere. And the entire gamut of American media, New York Times, CBS, they all were amicus curiae in this case. And Mr. Raju won. The point I was making was soon after that, I met Mr. Bachchan to talk about his side of the story. And as you were describing, he was quite distraught about what
he
had
was
happened to him.
distraught. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
distraught. Absolutely. Because, I mean, just the viciousness of the campaign against him. It was vicious.
right, right.
Yeah.
But just the last few things, Chitra. I know I've taken enough of your time.
Yeah.
I was, I happened on an interview with N. Ram on News Laundry. Just caught a few snippets from that. Your apparent tension with him on
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
manipulated basically what you did.
Yeah.
He's saying things like Chitra was a stringer who just supplied us notes.
Yeah.
Basically, I wrote the stories,
Yeah.
and she picked up the bits from that and used it. That these are his claims.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your? Is there any relationship at all? Is there any association, friendship left between the two?
No, no, that was an old interview, right? That with News Laundry.
Oh, that's an older interview.
Very old interview. So after I've written the book, he has not said anything because in the book,
Oh, he hasn't. Okay.
no, I have quoted chapter and verse where he was wrong. That was an old interview where it's fact, I sent him detailed notes. There was
Right.
no question. I sent him detailed notes because he didn't have any sources. They were my sources. And then some of the stories in the beginning, as they appeared, he wrote them because they have very different writing styles.
Yeah, do.
And then I picked up those stories, and then he says, I just took them up. I wrote them without accrediting, but they were my stories,
Right.
So how can he take credit for my work? But subsequently, in this book, I have addressed all those issues. So he has not reacted to any of this. And in fact, in this book, I have gone on to say how he sat on documents, AE services, how he threatened the prime minister without publishing stuff. I have gone very, very in detail into all that he has done.
This interview does mention those things. So I think this is a newer interview that we are talking about. I just saw it this morning.
Okay.
Where he does mention why he held on to that AE services story in terms of impact, etc. Then he talks about how, as a journalist, he had to be absolutely certain of so many details. So
I think it was in the old interview also.
Oh, I see. Then I stand corrected.
How he is an old-fashioned journalist and he needed to. Yeah,
you're right.
That's an old interview. Yeah.
Now, to conclude, tell me how the book has. Obviously, it's got a hell of a lot of attention. I was tracking you, and I'm so glad that a fellow journalist is going to make some money by the honest work of writing. So, how is it doing?
The book is doing very well. The book is doing very well. It's been on bestsellers lists. Obviously, I was on this interview with Lalan Top, with Saurabh.
I saw that, yeah.
Saurabh was saying that, did I think that my work would bring down a government? No. On the same note, did I think that my book would do so well? No. Obviously, when you write a book, you want it to do well, but book being sold out, especially after so many years, no. But I'm happy.
It's interesting you should mention, because even when Bofors was exploding, not a lot of people understood the complexity of what was going on.
Yeah.
to think that nearly 40 years hence, it has revived interest in it. It's
Yeah.
quite remarkable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be very if I had the money, I would make you an option offer to make it into a movie.
Yeah.
It's really cinematic in many
Well,
ways.
well,
I hope you get it.
आपके मुंह में घी शक्कर.
थोड़ी सी शक्कर दे देना हमको और कुछ नहीं चाहिए. No, this is once again many congratulations. It's a hell of a lot of hard work that you put in, and I'm very glad that you're getting the attention that you so eminently deserve.
Thank you so much for taking the time to interview, and it's very kind of you.